Whether you're a solo backpacker, a volunteer, or just a budget-conscious traveler, we provide valuable insights and resources to make your journey unforgettable without breaking the bank. Book your trip now with just a $300 deposit and flexible monthly payments until your travel date. For more travel inspiration and tips, follow us on Instagram or visit us at visittanzania4less.com. Visit Tanzania for Less, your dream adventure within reach.
Good afternoon, people. You know what time it is. It's time for 22, December 13th, 2024. I'm Gregory Roberts, and
I'm Melvin Burns.
Welcome to the show. Remember, all these shows repeat themselves, so if you miss it, please go to our sites, WVS 103.7 The Beat or M106. The show is brought to you by our sponsor, Bishop Custom Series and Entertainment. Remember, for all your needs, see the Bishop. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, you can call Lady J, Janae, 231-727-5007. And if you'd like to be a part of the conversation, please visit those sites, M106 or WVS 103.7 The Beat, and you can catch us. What's that weather looking like, sir?
Well, we had a low this morning of 13. The little thing's going to come in the sky later today. That'll be the sun. We'll have a high of 22. Saturday, a low 14 again, but we get above freezing with a high of 34. Sunday and Monday, lows in the 30s, high of 41 and 46, 60% chance of rain on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Next Tuesday, low of 33, high 37. Next Wednesday, a low 27, high 35. Next Thursday, we have a low of 25, high of 33. And next Friday, 40% chance of snow, low of 25, high of 34.
I want to thank everybody that's been watching like 480 plays that you did on Facebook last week. Thank you so much for participating in the show. When I started this show 4 years ago, it was to bring the truth, to educate you about issues, not choose sides, to educate you. The two guests that we have on today, we're going to discuss two serious issues. First, we have Professor Quigley. We're going to talk about what's happening in Syria and Gaza. And then the second half of the show, we have Dr. Leslie Roberts, and we're going to be talking about mental health during this Christmas time. With that, talk a little bit about who we got coming first.
Our first guest is Professor Quigley from Ohio State University. He's a 3-time graduate of associate, master's, and doctorate degree from Harvard University.
Wow.
He's on the faculty, the Moritz College of Law at the Ohio State University. Well-versed and published.
Well-versed.
On matters in the Middle East, foreign trade, as well as international law.
Several books.
So today we want to spend a little time speaking with Professor Moritz about things going on in Gaza, Syria. Again, we know we have a limited amount of time, but we want him to kind of educate and inform us. And we know that you catch the news, so much going on, but just to kind of bring us up to speed on what's taking place there. Maybe if we have a little time, some thoughts about how things might change with the new administration.
Yeah, and how this affects us at home.
Yes, for sure.
Put your hands together for the professor. How you doing, sir?
Well, thank you.
Well, you were from Ohio State. We won't hold you against that.
Wait a minute.
Michigan.
Don't forget, even though we're in Michigan, Professor Moritz, I am a graduate of the School of Public Administration, so you are at home here.
Good. I'm sure we'll get along fine.
Yeah,
we'll be fine. Professor.
We won't talk about the war over Toledo. That was way back.
Yeah.
Professor, we have a lot to talk about. First, tell people a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get right into what's happening in the Middle East. Professor?
Good. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, I work in the field of international law, dealing with such things as the courts that are functioning now, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. Um, uh, so war and peace issues is really what I have focused on, and human rights, you could say, as well.
Yes. Let's start from there. We have over a year we've seen this war in the Gaza and pretty much seen Gaza decimated over the last year. Now we have uh, advancements in Syria. Um, let's take that from the aspect of what we've seen happen in Gaza. Thousands of people displaced. Can you just kind of give us like a current status of it and kind of an update on where things are, and also maybe from the perspective of people have talked about possible crimes against humanity and some of the atrocities performed by either side of that whole in Gaza. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yes, yeah, it's a really horrible situation. I mean, you've described it very well. Um, uh, the people of Gaza are being starved to death, probably intentionally so, um, and there doesn't seem to be any way out for them. They're not getting any help from Europe, certainly not from the United States. I mean, the United States is supplying the weaponry that Israel is using to kill them. Um, so, from the perspective of the international, approach on all this, it has not been good. What has been better is the international institutions. The International Criminal Court has used the term that you just mentioned, crime against humanity. And they've issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu for crimes against humanity on an allegation that the Israeli forces are starving the population as their kind of means of warfare. And that's something that can lead to prosecution for governmental leaders at The Hague in the International Criminal Court. So a warrant has been issued for Mr. Netanyahu and for the fellow who was defense minister up until recently, a man named Yoav Gallant. Then you've got the International Court of Justice, where a case has been brought against Israel by South Africa, and the charge there is genocide. And the court has let that case go beyond the initial stage and has said that the allegations that South Africa is making of genocide are what we call in the law true prima facie, meaning on the face of them, until there has been some more extensive review of the evidence. So it hasn't gone to a final judgment yet, but at least at the early stage, the International Court of Justice thought that there is significant merit to the allegation that Israel is committing genocide. So you've got genocide in the International Court of Justice. You have crimes against humanity in the International Criminal Court. Now, so far, that hasn't done a great deal of good for the people on the ground. A few weeks ago, Bernie Sanders was trying to get the Congress to stop military assistance to Israel because that is how Israel is able to continue the bombing. I mean, they bomb and kill maybe 15, 20 people a day. It's gotten so routine now that the media doesn't report it, or they just say, well, there were 15, Palestinians killed today in a bombing of an apartment complex, and the Israeli government says that they were going after a Hamas operative. And that's kind of the end of the news report, and they go on to talk about something else. I mean, this is horrific that you've got 15, 20 people being killed every day. And it's being done with bombs that U.S. taxpayers are supplying.
I'm glad you brought up the taxpayers. Talk to the average person in the United States that say, what does this have to do with me? But it does have a lot to do with you.
Well, it does, because we're letting it happen financially and by the policy of the U.S. government, which has been one of continuing to give this aid regardless of what the Israeli military does. So we are very much involved in the situation. The whole situation does not redound to the benefit of the United States. Around the world, we are seen as being complicit in war crimes, in crimes against humanity, in genocide. So, if you're an American who wants to travel somewhere, you want to do business in other countries, you might get some direct pushback on this kind of thing.
Professor, you say that. Do you think most Americans are aware of how we're perceived when it comes to the situation taking place in Israel, how we're perceived by the outside world? You talked about the international courts, and even what's our level of participation? When we see like a Netanyahu come up, how did the U.S. participate, or did we vote at all participate in that court?
Well, we have tried to protect Israel from the international courts. In the International Criminal Court, the United States has been very critical of the court for issuing an arrest warrant. President Biden said that it was outrageous that this warrant was issued against Mr. Netanyahu. In the International Court of Justice, we've criticized that as well. One of the things the International Court of Justice has done that I haven't mentioned yet is that it said a couple of months ago that it is illegal for Israel to have any presence whatsoever in the Gaza Strip, that its very being there is illegal, apart from the illegality of what it is doing. And when that case was up in the International Court of Justice, the United States went to the court and said, do not issue a ruling that it is illegal for Israel to be in Gaza. So the United States has been on the side of protecting Israel in all of those international institutions.
Professor, what do you say to the people that say, taking the side of Israel, saying that, listen, they didn't start this, and the United States government is trying to protect Israel, saying that it was the fault of the people that came over and did that horrific terroristic thing. What do you say to that pushback?
Mm-hmm. No, that's an important point that you raised. I think you have to look at the whole picture. Gaza had been under a very severe blockade for over a decade before that happened. And it did not look from the standpoint of the leadership in Gaza that there was really any way out for them. And I think that's why they did what they did in October of 2023.
Mhm.
So, I mean, one can go back and look at why it all happened. You can take it back as far as 1967 when Israel went in and invaded Gaza. It committed an act of aggression, so it's there as an aggressor in Gaza. You can go back to 1948 when the Israeli government ran most of the people of Palestine out of their country and ran most of them, well, many into Lebanon, I'll say, and many others into Gaza. So most of the population of Gaza is families that were evicted by force in 1948. And under the law, under international law, they have a right to go back to their homes. So all those people in Gaza, they have a right to go into Israel. So there was a basis for what was done, despite the fact that they took it to an extreme and committed crimes themselves. But it's more complicated than just looking at what happened on that date. Then, I mean, you can look at it from the standpoint of what Israel has done since. And you can say, well, even if Israel had a right to do something in response to that, they can't starve the whole population of the country. And that is clearly what they're doing now. I mean, you have people that are unable to feed their children because of the situation there. The aid hasn't gotten in because Israel has been blocking the aid coming in. When it does come in, the situation is so desperate that it's almost impossible to have an orderly distribution of the aid because people are so desperate. You know, they see a truck coming, they go after it, and and that's, I mean, you can say, well, that's their fault in a way, but it's their fault because they've got people at home that are starving to death. I mean, literally starving to death.
I don't want to sound too cynical, but I happened to be in Israel in 2020. I had a chance to go there, and I wasn't aware of how overcrowded much of Israel was, places like Jerusalem. Is it cynical to think that part of this over excessive action in Gaza is that Israel needs more territory to expand just because of the country is so overpopulated?
Well, Gaza is much more overpopulated than anywhere else. Even with the substantial numbers that have been killed. But there's no justification for taking over somebody else's territory because you need, more legroom. I mean, they've been bringing people into Israel now ever since the 1950s. And while they have been excluding the people that are the indigenous population of the country, the people that were kicked out. So that's what should be happening, is that those people should be allowed to come back.
Okay.
Professor, what are the chances that Gaza will return back to a normal country, or is this going to take years because of this travesty that's been happening?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's hard to see how Gaza can be brought back to a normal kind of existence in less than, I don't want to pick a number of years here, but a very long time. You've got a country that is largely rubble in terms of the infrastructure, the business of the cities. the Israeli government has even dug up the pavement on roads. This is something that I haven't seen happen in war elsewhere in the world. That is, that not only has Israel bombed buildings and destroyed the buildings, but it has sent bulldozers in to pick up the pavement on the roads and turn the roads into rubble as well. So you're talking about a reconstruction that is very substantial.
Okay. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but can you talk about Syria a little bit and what's taking place there currently? We had some major changes in the last week.
Yes, yeah, the Syria situation is very difficult and complicated. You've had a government in power that is actually based in an ethnic minority called the Alawites in Syria. So it was a government that really came into existence in part to protect that minority from the Sunni Arabs, but a coalition was worked out with the Sunni Arabs, and that's been the governing apparatus now for 50 years or more. But that government had turned to being quite repressive, and that is what led to a civil war breaking out about 12 years ago now. And this overthrow is the culmination of that civil war, which had died down a bit, but picked up again just within the last month. So that is what is going on. It's not clear what the tenor of the new ruling group is in Syria. That remains to be seen. It's a group that initially had connections with Al Qaeda, then broke from Al Qaeda, so it has an Islamist orientation, but is not trying to institute the kinds of governance that you associate with, Afghanistan or that sort of thing. But it's also unclear how that situation is going to impact the situation of the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. The Israeli government has taken the occasion of the instability in Syria now, with the government being overthrown and a new government just not quite being up and running. They've taken advantage of that to bomb virtually all of the military installations of Syria that they can find to bomb. They've been doing that over the last week. That has been very seriously criticized by the Secretary General of the United Nations as being unjustified. I mean, the rationale that Israel gives is that these military installations could fall into the hands of terrorists, but that it seems much more likely that the real reason is that Israel simply wants to be sure that Syria, regardless of who is running Syria, will not be a strong power, so that they can do what they want there in the future, that Israel can do what it wants. So that's a very troubling aspect of the whole situation. The other thing is that there are reprisals being taken against those who were associated with the government that has now been overthrown. I mean, some of those people, were running the prisons and did horrible things. But you've got a situation of I would call it chaos, where you have mobs of people, looking for people to execute.
Would you speak to the average person in America that do you think that they actually pay attention to things like the World Court, NATO, or do you think that we are too busy concentrating on us?
Well, I think what is done in these international courts should be something of a wake-up call, because you get the picture from the media, that we're the good guys everywhere in the world, and we're trying to improve the world, and then you have these international courts saying just the opposite. Um, um, but I think you're right in that it's hard to get attention to those things. It's hard for people to come to see that has some significance for the United States or for their lives.
Question, and we're running out of time, but how do we start? What's the answer? What's number one, number two when it comes down to Gaza right now in Israel?
Well, the most important thing that should be done is that we should stop supplying the bombs. And that, has been raised in the U.S. Senate. As a practical matter, I don't see it as succeeding, particularly with the new Congress that's coming in January, which Congress that seems to be oriented to staying out of international affairs, except when it comes to Israel. So I think if the public could come to see that the Congress has a policy on Israel that is completely at odds with what it is saying for everywhere else in the world, and that this really costs us money. This is money out of our pockets as taxpayers. I think if the public can come to see that, we could get to a better place.
One last question. What's happening in Russia, Ukraine, Syria, Gaza, all over? You just mentioned a point, instead of us going out being sheriffs of every place, how important would it be if we just took care of our country and took that money and invested in our infrastructure?
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be a much better expenditure of all of this money. We've been giving Israel something like $3 billion a year now for decades, and now we're giving it even more than that. If you think about the water in Flint, Michigan, if you think about 1,000 other things that need to be done, you can come up with much better ways of spending all that money.
Wow, Professor, will you come back and keep us updated on what's going on in world affairs?
I'll be very happy to. You're doing a great service with your program.
Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
That was Professor John Quigley. That was a lot of information, I know, but it's important that we talk about world affairs.
Yeah, let's just start the conversation. You know what? I was getting to ask. We had shorter time, but if you got a half hour and you watch the world news at 6:30, maybe watch BBC or read some non-American news source just to get a different perspective.
All right, it's the bottom of the hour. I know we got so much to do and talk about. You're listening and watching Torn Unto on 103.7 The Beat with Pastor Melvin Burns and Gregory T. Roberts. We'll see you in a couple seconds.
The wait is over. The all-new Umoja Radio Network, home to over 40 Black-owned radio stations and podcasts, is here for you. Connect to the world's fastest-growing collection of unapologetically Black and proud media, from podcasts to independent Black-owned radio stations, and access to the important news and music you need. Umoja Radio is from our culture, by our culture, for our culture. The all-new Umoja Radio is available right now on Google Play and the Apple Store. Join the movement. Be empowered.
When smoking gives you COPD, you learn to lie a little bit. You make up excuses like, I have to get my keys. You guys go on. Anything so you can walk at your own pace. I used to do that all the time. Those lies don't work anymore. My tip is, the worst lies are the lies you tell yourself. Like smoking isn't that dangerous.
You can quit. For free help, visit cdc.gov/tips.
Welcome back to 103.7 to be an M106. This is your news show torn into December 13th, 12 days away from Christmas, which brings up a very interesting point. People are stressing.
Oh, they are. They are. So we get to this point every year. We try to deal with this issue. We're going to keep doing it, but they get under pressure from family, buying gifts, the grandkids, the kids. They get overwhelmed.
I tell you, this year hit me differently because I turned 60, and it's been a lot of reflection there, too.
Okay. You giving the gift of reflection this year?
Yeah, the gift of reflection. All right. So who is our next guest?
Our next guest is Dr. Leslie Roberts, the founder of WMPS. Dr. Roberts has spent over 20 years in this field and committed to counseling with compassion. She counsels in the area of mental health as well as coaches couples who are dealing with divorce. And she's also involved in empowering female entrepreneurs. And we're excited to welcome to our program today, as you like to say. If everybody would give a big hand.
Put your hand together.
Welcome to our show, Dr. Leslie Roberts.
Hi, good afternoon.
I don't know if we're relation or not, but how you doing, cousin? So listen, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're located.
I'm the owner of West Michigan Psychological Services, like you mentioned. We are predominantly along the lake shore. So we've got 5 different locations, as south as Hamilton, Michigan, the south side of Holland, the north side of Holland, Grand Haven, and then Norton Shores. So we have focused on providing mental health services along the lakeshore because the lakeshore is an underserved overall area for mental health.
Yes.
Can you please say that last statement again? Because I don't think people understand the mental health crisis that we're going through.
The lakeshore is a very underserved area in regards to services for mental health along the lakeshore, all up and down the state of Michigan.
Wow.
Let me start here, and we're going to talk about the holiday, but we work in workplaces. It's still that stigma of people to go see a mental health professional. We'll send them to a doctor all day long and tell them take every pill out there. Yeah. But can you just say something, not even an advertisement for your business, but to help folks understand the necessity or the importance of taking care of their mental health?
Yeah, so everyone has mental health, right?
Yes.
Right.
All of us, just like we have heart health and brain health and body health, we have mental health. And for most of us in our lifetime, we will have some difficulty with our mental health, like all of us will have some difficulty with our physical health. So treating your mental health is really a proactive way of keeping yourself healthy throughout all the year, but especially as we're talking about today during the holidays, which can be a most wonderful time of the year, but also difficult for a lot of people in a lot of different ways at various stages of their life.
Okay, so let's talk about this time of the year, stress. Where do we start?
Ultimately, we start by taking care of ourselves and knowing what those things are for each person is different, right? For some people, it's getting really into the holidays and enjoying all the different festivities that come along with it. For a lot of people, that's really overwhelming. The pressures of family and things to be involved in and activities. It can be a lot, it's particularly because we tend to believe that everyone has wonderful relationships in their family and in their communities. And that's not always the case, depending on the person and, again, stage of life, right? Mm-hmm. For some people, all the activities can be overwhelming. All the pressures to provide, to be in a culture that's focused on purchasing, so that there's financial pressures, there's time pressures. There's often, we're at the end of the year. So for a lot of people, there's work pressures, right? It's up to the end of the year to get everything done before we start a new calendar year. So acknowledging that, knowing that, and being able to say that even though this is a wonderful time of year for a lot of people, it can also be hard, and that's okay.
You know, and especially you look at people are unfriending people and uninviting people because of the last election. That is causing stress as well on this season.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue that's been more prevalent over the course of probably the last 8-10 years, is that family discussions are a little bit different than they used to be.
Yeah. Dr. Roberts, two things I want to ask you about. First, it seems to me I'm hearing more this year than ever, or more sensitive to it. People who are going through the holidays, and it's the first holiday they lost a parent or a spouse or something. Can you say something to people who are dealing with that as they're going through that loss they're dealing with that loss for the first time going into the holidays?
Yeah, the first thing that I think is really important is to acknowledge it, right? We'll say often you have to name it to tame it, right? So until you name something as being difficult, hard, new, unfamiliar, overwhelming, it's hard to really deal with it until we say it out loud to ourselves or to other people in our life. And then being able to find, for a lot of people, it's a new normal, right? Each after the passing of a loved one or a loss in life, every holiday becomes the first. Every anniversary, every significant date becomes the first. So how do you make a new normal for that in your life? And for a lot of people, it's finding a way to both grieve and accept and acknowledge the loss, but also find a new way to honor the person that you have lost in your life.
That's good.
We'll find new traditions, new way of doing things. So you combine the new with also setting realistic expectations of what you can do this year. Maybe it's not going to be the same holiday. Maybe it's not going to be like it was previous years, and that's okay.
How dangerous it is, you know, people, I know how you feel. You'll get over it. Rub some dirt on a kid. Dangerous is that information. How about just sit down and just hold my hand and be with me?
As humans, we really struggle to figure out how to support people in loss. We say, all of us have been in a position where we've both heard and said something that's kind of cringy afterwards. And the thought is that the intention is pure, right? The intention is, I want to show you I support you. I want to show you I love you. But there's a lot of ways to do that. And most of them aren't in our words often, right? Sometimes it's just better to show up and walk alongside of someone or sit with someone, knowing that we don't have the words to express or to really make them feel like we get it, because we don't, right?
Please say it again. Please say it again.
You just don't always get it, and our words aren't always helpful.
Wow.
Can you help us? How do we, for people we suspect need to see a mental health professional, help us sort of, how do we engage people, you know, in a way to get them to understand they need to see someone?
Well, I think providing education, right? So normalizing the fact that participating in therapy is a normal part of life. It's a part of taking care of yourself. It doesn't have to be only in crisis. It can be also when things are not bad, learning how to handle. I mean, you didn't learn how to ride a bike because someone told you to get on a bike. You learned how to ride a bike by practicing over and over and over again. So if you ever had to get on a bike, you would, I mean, hopefully we would still know how. It's been a while, but I learned a lot of different times as a kid. And so practice really does make perfect, or at least allows you to have the skill set when necessary. And we don't do that in crisis.
Wow. So where do we start? Because, you know, we have a lot of people dealing with triggers, you know, like Pastor said, you know, the first year of a lost one. Where do we start?
Well, in regards to mental health treatment,
Yes.
You call and make an appointment. It's a hard time of the year because oftentimes people don't have the time and they don't seem to have a lot of the energy either. But ultimately, this is a part of self-care. And so calling, asking for help. There's a lot of services that are available both for crisis and for non-crisis. It's just a matter of picking up the phone, sending in an email, doing the research online. A lot of it, though, the difficulty is it's going to come from within the person, because we live in a world where I can't force you to get mental health treatment no matter how much you might need it. We can if you're guarded or you have children or, you are the adult in the situation. But when it comes to being an adult ourselves, we really do have the right to not take care of these things. And it becomes a matter of self-agency, taking that first step, knowing that you need it, or supporting someone as they do that. Here, let me call with you. Or let me check with my own therapist and see if they have openings, or if they have openings where they work. So that walking alongside someone who you feel really needs that help.
Okay. You said something about, not waiting till there's crisis. You do marriage counseling, you do counseling for couples in divorce. They all probably come way later than they should.
Yeah.
After the burn is burnt down. But can you talk to couples about the need, again, not waiting until there's a crisis to come in and sit down with a counselor?
I mean, marriage is hard. I think it's kind of one of the hard, it falls right up there with loss and parenting and, being an adult. All of this is really hard. And so being able to just assume that you know how to do it when none of us have been given any playbooks. Many of us have, mediocre modeling throughout the course of life, if not worse. And so to accept or just acknowledge the fact that we don't know how to do this and we can get help and it can be okay, even if we're not in crisis. I mean, I go to therapy every single week. I'll never stop. I'm not in crisis. Things are fine. And also, it's just a really great way of proactively taking care of myself.
What I did with my children is I told them before they got married and got my blessing that they had to go to counseling before they got marriage. Made that step. A lot of people think that counseling is later. Would you agree that how about start with counseling before you make that step?
That's a fantastic idea. The myth is that counseling is for problems. And I'm not saying counseling doesn't help with problems, but really proactively, counseling is for healthy communication, healthy boundaries, establishing your identity within a relationship, figuring out how to adult, how to do things effectively, how to talk to your parents, how to talk to your children. Those are not things that are crisis per se. They're a part of taking care of yourself and becoming the healthiest version of you can as an adult, right? And if you want to be involved in a healthy marriage, being your own healthy individual self, 1 and 1 does not equal 1, it equals 2. Two autonomous individuals who are healthy within a relationship with each other.
We see the structure of families changing now. We have people all of a sudden moving back in the household. So the structure is changing. Talk to people that are going through that issue right now and try to go through the holiday and take care of grandparents and mothers and fathers and kids and all that kind of stuff.
We see a ton more multi-generational family systems living together, supporting one another than we probably ever have, at least in my lifetime. And what that means is you've got grandparents raising children, or children living at home with their parents to take care of them, children and parents and grandparents all living together. And it creates for an interesting dynamic in regards to how these generations, which historically would launch and not come back home, all make it now under the same roof, sometimes under the same finances, the same shared resources. It can cause a lot of family stress, or just even a lot of boundary issues, right? Who does what? Who takes care of what? Who's in charge of what? And those are all things that can be dealt with in therapy and help, in order to help families kind of move towards healthiness in the system changes that we're going to experience. Because the world changes, people change. We just need to figure out how to adapt to it.
Okay. Let me ask you about another area. Greg and I are both involved in ministry in the Christian faith, and we talk about this, but our ministries, Christian ministry past has committed malpractice when it comes to encouraging people to get mental health help. So could you talk to people about how it's okay to practice your faith and go to counseling at the same time? I don't put words in your mouth, but talk to people who sometimes are hesitant because they think it's an attack on their faith.
Yeah, I think it can augment faith, right? Like this is a resource that's provided, the resource that's available, a resource that can be used alongside. There are plenty of therapists who are Christian trained therapists, and plenty of therapists who are not advertising themselves that way, but walk along people whenever someone opens the door and says, "This part is really important to me." Well, if this part is really important to you, then we're going to make that a part of the work that we do.
That's good.
All right. Talk to people that this is taboo, is nobody's business. It's our house business, what I'm going through. And I'm not going to share my pain or anxiety. Talk to those individuals right now.
Well, it's important for people to know one thing. We have the highest level of confidentiality of any discipline across any field I've ever encountered, right? If you go to your primary care doctor and you say, "Hey, I want to refer my friend," they can acknowledge that they know your friend when they get there, or that you are referral. I mean, we can walk past you on the street and you will never know that we know who you are. Confidentiality is so high. We take it incredibly serious for this very reason. People come in and they tell us the hardest things they've ever told anybody. And so it's really important that they know that we are trustworthy, that what they say remains in between in that session and is held safe in that space. Having said that, it is hard to talk about our pain, but you can't get through the other side if you're not willing to go through it.
That's good.
And a lot of people will say, "I've got this great family and this great structure of friends in my life, and those are my therapists." And sometimes maybe that can be the case. But for a lot of people, that is not the case, or they just don't do it. And so for what I'll tell people often is, it's really, you get your hair cut regularly, right?
Right.
So if you come in and take the time regularly just to devote to this, you're doing yourself a favor, because you are giving the time and the space. And if you didn't give it, then maybe you would never go through this pain or get through the other side, which is really, for most of us, the whole goal.
How important is, being transparent for, like, Pastor Melvin and I, my past, what I went through as a young person. It is important for me to share those experiences and that information to people so they wouldn't go through the same thing. How important is that being transparent, being open, and talking about those experiences?
For you as a pastor?
Oh, yes, me as a pastor or anyone. I
mean, people are going to vary on that. Some people are going to work through something and maybe they'll even go to therapy and work through it, but don't really want to share openly. If you're going to invest your time, energy, and your insurance and or money into therapy, it's probably a good idea to give your therapist all the tools, all the things they need to know about you to be helpful.
Right.
We like to call it a doorknob confessional, where on the way out the door, someone's got their hand on the door and then they're like, "Oh, by the way."
by the way.
I like the term doorknob confession. Yeah.
That would have been good to know an hour ago, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you're going to invest your time and energy in, you're going to want to tell the truth. And people are actually historically pretty bad at that in therapy, but we learn to kind of have a lie detector in the room. But also in the professions that you are both in, it is important to know when and how transparency is important. I am a therapist who is trained often that we don't have any personal aspect of us come in the room. And I've really learned that that's not how I function as a therapist. I really know that the things I've experienced in the world, good, bad, and ugly, have really led me to be where I am today. And without those experiences, I wouldn't be nearly the therapist that I'm capable of being for other people. So I'm okay with that. Within the right timing and place. And I feel like that's really applicable to your profession as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right now, 12 days away from Christmas. So help us get through these 12 days and going into the new year. Help us. Where do we start?
Okay. Realistic expectations of what you're going to do. Maybe doing a little bit more of the things you want to do and a little bit less of the things that feel obligatory.
Oh. Wow. Say that again. That's good.
Yeah.
More of what you want, within reason, right? And understanding that, family for a lot of people is very important, but maybe we do it in a limited time. Maybe we set a good boundary. I'm going to come for Christmas Eve, but I'm not going to come for Christmas. Or I'm not going to come till noon on Christmas because it's important to me to wake up in the morning and enjoy my time at home with my family. Also, I really find that, and I say this because not that I'm great at it, but that I teach it all the time. And that those who can't teach, right? Gratitude. Like, it's so important when we go through difficult times or overwhelming times or just times to never forget to be grateful. What's one thing?
Thank you.
I'm making
What are
a
you
list. This is
grateful
good.
for today, right? And no matter where we are in life, we always can find one thing, one small thing that we're grateful for.
You know, I'm so glad you said that because, you know, walking in the streets and stuff like that, going into stores or going to get my tea today, how important is it just to smile or just to, like you show gratitude, to just be open and be friendly in this environment?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's always a way to reframe, right? You can walk in the store and smile and think, I'm grateful because that I'm here to purchase gifts. And although the store is way too busy and there's too many lines and too many people, and I don't like any of that, the thought process, instead of I should have bought this online and sat at home, could be I'm grateful enough that I can afford to buy a couple of presents this year, because maybe that hasn't always been the case for me, or maybe it's not the case for everybody.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. As we're-
Gratitude, just a little bit, one more thing about it, really does scientifically change our mindset. And I know you both know that, because I know you probably talk about it an awful lot in your own careers, but it really does change how we view the world. And so practicing that regularly, again, not something I'm great at, but something we all need to lean into, particularly during the holidays.
Wow.
I'm appreciating this conversation so much, Dr.
Loving
Roberts.
it.
The other thing that comes with holidays is the New Year's resolutions, or the lies we tell ourselves. But and again, just talk to people. I mean, good, bad. If you're going to do them, give us some advice about those.
Well, I think there's some of us out there, the same people that like sticky notes and like organizational charts. We like New Year's resolutions, right? But I think just being able to smile and chuckle a little bit like we just did, and acknowledge the fact that those of us that establish them are pretty much going to be setting ourselves up for failure within a couple of weeks, a couple of days, a couple of hours, depending on how steep they are. So acknowledging that, smiling, and knowing that long-term change takes time, dedication, self-compassion, knowing that we're not set up for perfection, and we're hardwired to struggle as humans. And so acknowledging that we're going to struggle, but you can make long-term change. It just might take the full year, and it might not happen on the first, and it might not happen perfectly. I mean, it's just not going to.
Well, what about patience as well? Because we want to lose that weight right now. We want to look better. We want. But like you said, it's going to take time.
Yeah. And we can have the things that we want. I really, truly believe that. But it's going to take hard work, or dedication, patience, self-compassion, knowing that we're going to fail. And really, truly, absolute change or long-term change is made by failing a whole bunch of times.
That's good.
Yeah, you use the term, man. I'm gonna come back to this. I'm probably gonna steal it and research it, but you talked about like setting goals and self-compassion, and I was like, man, that sounds so good. You see people again, they jump on themselves. I was gonna do this and I didn't get it done. And talk about that, that idea of going easy on yourself or taking it easy on yourself. If you don't, if you don't get there, it's okay if you have some stumbles along the way.
Well, you have to, right?
Yeah.
Without them, you're not going to make it. That's what long-term change is about. Self-compassion is really interesting. There's a ton of research about it. I encourage you to do it. I think the research comes to mind to me is like they've studied athletes who are compassionate towards themselves and ones that are not. And long-term athletes who are most successful, we're talking collegiate athletes and beyond, are the ones that are compassionate, self-compassion.
Wow.
I teach a lot about the goldfish rule, and this comes from a TV show that I watched, and my son told me about after a football practice one day. And the concept is, what are you going to be after a game? Like a goldfish, completely forget all of it and move on. And that's how we move forward in making change, is understanding that we're going to mess it up.
Wow.
It's not going to be perfect. But in the long run, if you really want to lose that weight, it might take you the whole year. And you might fall a lot. But if you keep getting up every time, eventually that change will happen.
Yeah, that's good.
Doctor, how important is it that we take the opportunity to treat ourselves?
I'm a big fan of it. I think it's really good self-care. I think people get caught up in depriving themselves of things that are really important for them. I don't think we should overindulge in everything we want, but what about pairing something with hard work, right? Like, so I need to do this thing. I don't really feel like doing it, but after I'm done, I'm going to treat myself. or I'm going to do something good for myself. And treating doesn't have to be a financial strap. It can just be something like self-care or watching a movie or something that's free ultimately. And I think for me, I love the idea of pairing the hard with the things that feel good, because the hard is good for you, but it doesn't feel good.
I have a friend of mine that his brother was a police officer, and he just thought it was perfectly fine. The next thing you know, he's going to a funeral.
Yeah.
How important is it that we check on our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, and everyone just to see how you doing?
I think it's incredibly important. Oftentimes, we are people who like to mind our own business, right? That's not my thing. I don't want to intrude. I don't want to take the risk. And sometimes I think, and maybe not all the time, maybe sometimes if we're too nosy, people don't appreciate that. But you never know. When people go through really difficult things, they always remember the people who came out of the woodwork to say, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you? How can I support you? And I guess for me, that's how I want to show up in this world. So I'm willing to be a little risky in asking people, because you never know. It's the starfish rule, right? Like, you go along a beach and there can be a million starfish washing up on the shore. And if you pick one up and throw it back in, well, did you really help all the millions that are there? Maybe not, but you did help that one.
Man, she's throwing dimes like Steve Nash.
I know.
I
Yeah,
mean, she just throwing bits of knowledge out there. Wow. Doctor, okay. You want to go?
I want to ask.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we'll run out of time. You founder of West Michigan Psychological Services. Every practice is different. Tell people when you talk about your practice, what is it you hope people get when they come there? What's the atmosphere, the environment that you want people to receive when they come there?
We have a couple of really, really unique missions. So first of all, we're a full mental health practice, meaning you can come in for an evaluation, you can come in and receive therapy, and you can come in and receive medication management. And it is very difficult in the private practice world to find all three of those services offered under the same roof. I'm really proud of that. It's hard work, but we are clear that we want to always provide that along the lakeshore, an underserved area. And secondly, we believe in access to adequate mental health regardless of your social economic status. And I can't say that enough.
Please.
We want to help everybody regardless of where you come from and regardless of your social economic status. And we can still do that. And I will do everything in my power to make that never change.
That's awesome.
Last question, doctor. Talk to people right now that's feeling that financial crunch. The average American is $400 away from a disaster. Talk to people out there, because they see so many people giving, and there might be keeping the lights on or eating. But it's a financial crunch right now that is stressing them out. Talk to those individuals.
I think that in regards to what they can do to be helpful, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I mean,
to themselves. They're stressing out because maybe they can't pay a bill. They can't, because things are tight.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's probably pretty common for a lot of people. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, you can only do what you can do, right? And so we hopefully, as a community, we try to provide those resources that can be helpful for people. So I encourage people to reach out, take advantage of the services that are available. I mean, Muskegon is a county that's really working towards amping up many services, and that's part of the reason that I went to Muskegon, is because I want to be a part of giving back in the community to provide services to people who don't have access to these things other places, because the stress that comes with not being able to take care of both, not only your finances, but what about all the things that go along with that, your physical health, your mental health, and all the other areas that are impacted by not having enough money to keep a household going.
Wow. Dr. Roberts, would you come back on the show? We got so many things to talk about.
Anytime. It was really great to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
Yes.
Listen, the time is gone. Listen, it's 12 days away. Take a chance, take a deep breath, relax, okay? Listen, like as we always say, go out there, sow a seed in someone's life. You never know who you might touch. This is Torn in Two for this December 13th. We'll see you soon. Take care. God bless.